You are now listening to The Spearsy Spin with your host, Mike Spears.
Hi folks, and welcome to The Spearsy Spin. Today's show is a little bit different because we wanted to, through the magic of radio, bring Walter Cronkite back into the scheme of things, so that he could interview President Reagan, and this would be as of April 7th, 2017. We're going to try to do this for you so that we can see maybe a little bit of what Walter Cronkite thinks about how things are going, and maybe what President Reagan might say if this actually happened. So bear with us. We're going to use the magic of radio to make this happen.
This is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.
Good evening, I'm Walter Cronkite, and today we're taking a moment to talk to President Ronald Reagan. We'll be talking to the president about different things that he recalls from being president and what he thinks about current issues today. Mr. President, thank you for being with us. Now, Mr. President, many things are happening in the world today. Tell us, what do you think about Syria opposition on the same track as U.S. on terrorism?
Well, thanks for having me here today, Walter. It's been a while, and I know that there's problems again in the Middle East, yes. We had problems in Iran, as you know. President Assad, he's a different sort, and I think he's ruthless. And I think President Assad is going to, he'll need to be dealt with. I understand President Trump he's thinking about going over there.
And Mr. President, could you tell us about your thoughts of President Assad of Syria, the things he's done against his people?
Well, again, we're talking about a tyrant. And back in the 80s when I was president, we dealt with Libya. And as you know, we dealt with them quite strongly, yes. During the Carter administration, we dealt with Iran. I think the only way to deal with President Assad in Syria will be through strong military action.
Now, Mr. President, we know that you had issues with Iran. There was the Iran-Contra affair that you had to deal with, and I know that Oliver North was involved in that as well. But today, it's 2017, Iran now trying to get nuclear power. What do you think?
Well, Iran is a power that cannot be trusted. You probably remember George Bush saying that Iran was and is the axis of evil. And I think that's still true today. I think that NATO has to take a very strong hand with Iran, and that includes keeping military action on the table. And I know that won't set well with the Kremlin, but I say to hell with the Kremlin. We cannot have Iran with nuclear power.
Mr. President, there's a lot of speculation right now in the United States and the world for that matter with regard to Russia and Hillary Clinton. What are your thoughts?
Well, the Clintons have, over the years, they've been questionable sometimes, I think, in what they do and what they say. Now, I understand that the NSA, the CIA, the FBI, and some other folks are investigating the Clintons with regard to their ties to Russia. But more importantly, I think they need to also look It's Saudi Arabia, yes, because it seems to me that the king of Saudi Arabia has been way too friendly with the Clintons. And I would wonder why the king of Saudi Arabia would want to donate as much money as they have to the Clinton Foundation. So I think it's all suspect. That doesn't mean they're guilty, just means we need to take a look, yes.
And President Reagan, a follow-up to that is the investigation by the NSA, the FBI, and the CIA into the Trump administration with regard to collusion with Russia. Your thoughts on that?
Well, first you have to remember that Donald Trump is a businessman, and he's had dealings all over the world, yes, and one of the things that, that Russia is well known for is the export of natural gas. And of course they have pipelines that go to Chechnya and so on, the Ukraine and the like. So it's not surprising to see that the new president, President Trump, may very well have ties to Russia. And that's something that we have to look at, but it's also something that can be disclosed. And I know that he's talked about that, and those disclosures are there. I know his two sons are taking over the Trump empire. So that's where we are. I don't see it as a problem. As a matter of fact, it might be good to have somebody like Trump and Tillerson, who knows the Russians, who knows Vladimir Putin. And we've always had this Cold War mentality, yes, but I think we're past that. I think it's time that we try to get along with other superpowers in the world, and I think maybe this is it. This might be a reaching between the two countries. We'll have to wait and see.
There has been, and still is, a big focus on trying to rid the world of ISIS. That, of course, coming not only from the Middle East, but many countries throughout the world, as this terrorist group continues to bomb people, to hurt people, and to kill innocents. What do you think would be the best course of action, for the United States at least, to rid the world of ISIS?
Well, Walter, it's not as simple as people think, and you have people today that want to blame President Obama, and you can't, and I'll tell you why. And the reason is that even during the Nixon administration, there were problems in the Middle East, problems that should have been addressed, and they weren't. And so as we work forward and we get into, my time even, the Iran-Contra affair, trying to take care of issues there, it's a double-edged sword. And you have rebels in Iran, and you have rebels in Syria, and you have rebels in Iraq, and now you have ISIS. The biggest problem I see is that ISIS is nothing more than a power-killing machine, and there's just no easy remedy to that without killing them, because you can't deal with them, you can't make them understand. You can't sit at a table with someone who wants to kill you, who could care less about your values, who could care less about what you believe, but they will want you to believe what they believe. So, as much as I hate to say it, NATO will have to go into Pakistan, Iraq, and Afghanistan to rid themselves of ISIS, but also Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, and the rest. And it's going to be a major undertaking. But it has to be done, because if we don't, many more people, hundreds and thousands, will most likely die. And we can't allow that, no.
Of course, you were President of the United States 2 terms. You knew what it took to be a president, a good president. What are your thoughts on the Obama presidency, and do you think it hurt the United States, or did it help?
Well, I don't know. I wonder about some of the things that President Obama did. I don't think that President Obama understood America. And I think it's difficult for any president to sit in the White House, especially today, as either a Democrat or a sitting Republican, because we have too many differences, and these differences are growing, and there's a wide divide, and that divide gets longer and it gets deeper every day. Yes. So to answer that question, there are things that President Obama has done that I wonder about. But as a former president, it's not good for me, I don't think, to critique any president. I think that President Obama went in, and I think he had good intentions. I don't know exactly what happened, but do I think the United States is better? Well, no. It's not. Of course, now, when President Obama took over, he was coming in on the tail end of George Bush, and of course, George, he had his hands full with the economy, the housing market, and of course, well, let's face it, we were at war. So President Bush had to make some decisions that were tough. They were hard, and so President Obama came in after that. Do I think it was good for the United States? Well, not necessarily, no. But let me say this. Had it been a better time when President Obama came in, maybe things would have been different. I know that a lot of different people, including those in the government, have many different things to say about President Obama, and many people think that he doesn't like America. I don't know. I've never talked with President Obama, but President Obama is gone. He's not the president. And so now it's up to Donald Trump to make a decision. And he is the leader. So it's up to him to make new laws through the Congress, to make strides, to build America, to fill in the divide between the Republicans and the Democrats. And I think he will do it. There's been too many problems. The folks on the left, well, they need to have a say, and the folks on the right also need to have a say. And we gotta find a common ground.
If it were up to you today, would you go to war in Iraq knowing what you know after 9/11?
Well, Walter, you have to remember, the United States was attacked. It was an act of war. Anytime anyone comes into the United States to do harm, to to kill Americans, to destroy property. It's an act of war. The United States is a major superpower, as you know, and we're the most powerful country on the face of the planet. But these cowards, and that's exactly what they were, as cowards, killed innocent people for no apparent reason other than to let us know that they, through their cowardly ways, could get to us, and they did. Now your question is, would I go to war? And the answer is not just yes, hell yes. Because we have to take the war to people that would hurt America, to those that would hurt Americans. And that's where I would be. And I think George Bush did the right thing with Afghanistan. Now, I'm not so sure about Iraq. I think we could have waited. I think we should have waited a bit. Does that mean that we shouldn't have gone to Iraq? Well, I don't know. But I think we should have waited. And by not waiting, well, I think it hurt us in the Middle East. Because Saddam Hussein, he was a loose cannon. Now, no one denies that. And Saddam Hussein killed a lot of people, a lot of his own people, yes, but he also controlled the other terrorists. He was kind of the linchpin. And when we eliminated him, and then we pulled our troops out of Iraq, we created a vacuum. And ISIS and Al Qaeda and people of their ilk filled that vacuum, and now we're going back. And this time, if we go back, damn it, we've got to do it right.
Well, the Afghanistan war continues to rage on, yet we still seem to be no closer to ending that war than we were when we started it in 2001. What would be your course of action if you were still president today?
Well, like I just said, I believe that George Bush did the right thing by going to Afghanistan. However, if I was the president today, I would go to NATO, and I would go to NATO today and say, we have to put an end to all this. The terror, the death, the destruction. We just can't, we can no longer tolerate that. Now, as we sit here talking and relaxing with the dog barking, well, that's American. We enjoy that, but a lot of the folks in the Middle East don't have that. No, they don't. And they won't have it until we get people that represent ISIS and people that hate and people that are evil, until we either bring them to justice or we kill them. Because that's the only way. And we have to get with Russia. We have to get with China, Japan, Australia, the UK, Germany, Spain, Venezuela, and other similar countries. And we have to band together, and we have to go there. And I don't want to say do a cleansing, but what we do have to do is we have to go there and get rid of pure evil.
And Mr. President, as we look back on 9/11, do you think there'd be a way to foresee what was coming and to stop it? And furthermore, do you think that President Bush did the right thing at the right time during 9/11, but more importantly, after 9/11?
Well, Walter, I think we're going around the stump on this. Well, but let's talk about it. You asked that question. We'll give an answer. we had to do what we had to do after the attacks of 9/11. Would I have done it exactly as George Bush? Well, I wasn't there. But what I could say is, yes, I definitely would have went into Afghanistan. But I don't know that I'd go into Iraq, at least not right away. But we didn't finish what we should have finished in Iraq, and while we were there, we needed to get into Pakistan and Iran, because it's time to bring those people on board, or we need to discipline them, because if not, they will begin to uprise against us as well as other countries that represent peace, that are our allies of the United States. I mean, Israel is, of course, one of our allies, and we're friends. And Iran has said over the years that all they want to do is kill everyone in Israel. They want to destroy Israel. Now the mullahs are the same. And now you've got Iraq, you've got Syria, Libya, and Afghanistan, all of them waiting for their chance. The Palestinians have been attacking Israel for years, and we've tried peace, and other people have tried peace. Well, I remember Jimmy Carter talking to Anwar Sadat, and
As you know, we're in a different type of war as we deal with different forces from the Middle East. This is the first time, for the most part, that I think we've seen as many suicide bombers as we're seeing today coming out of the East. What would be your approach to ridding ourselves of this threat?
well, as always, the United States has stood firm with regard to trying to handle things politely, trying to work things out amicably. But there are just some countries and people within those countries and their leaders where you cannot appeal because they don't think like us. These folks have been at war for thousands of years. And let's face it, I mean, war and blood and killing, well, that's everyday life for them. So I hate to say it, but they're not really civilized. They are to a degree, but at the end of the day, no. So we could try to be diplomatic, but I think that time is gone, and I think it's time that we go over there with NATO and we clean it up, because every day that goes by that we don't, more and more innocent people are going to die at the hands of these folks.
Now, I know that when you were president that George Bush Sr. was the vice president under you and then later became president himself. Of course, his son, George Bush, well, we'll call him Jr., was president for 2 terms. How do you think he did?
Well, again, it's not good for a past president, I don't think, to make, opinions about another president. But let's face it, George Bush had some problems. He was just president a very short time when 9/11 came along, which would be difficult for any president. And on top of that, then we had the beginning of a recession. And that recession began to take hold as we got closer and closer to the housing fallout in 2008. So is it fair to judge him when there were so many things going on? Did he make all the right decisions? Well, no. Did he make some good decisions? Well, I think so. The one thing I'm not sure I agreed with, he changed the bankruptcy laws, which in itself had a lot of ripple effects. I mean, not just the bankruptcy law itself, but those laws rippled down throughout the courts, but also to attorneys and, of course, bankruptcy trustees. And there's a lot of paperwork
there's a lot of changes, and every law has its own statute that has to be identified and coded within the United States Bankruptcy Code. So I guess if I was to try to make anything out of George Bush Jr., I guess I'd have to say that maybe Iraq he should have waited on.
The economy, of course, is always a big issue, not only today, but back in the time when you were president. And certainly that'll be the concerns going forward with all the presidents that we'll see going forward from here. Today's economy, the growth seems to be stagnated. GDP may be up not quite 2%. What are your thoughts?
Well, again, I go back to the 80s, and we had Reaganomics. And of course, there were a lot of naysayers about Reaganomics, but during that time, the United States was making money. Currently, the United States manufactures only about 14% of the goods we use here in this country. Back then, we were over 80%. And so there's a lot to be said about trickle-down economics. Now, of course, you have economists across the aisle, especially, who won't go along with that. So the economy, the only way you can grow an economy is that you have to give the folks some breathing room, especially the middle class. So the tax cuts for the middle class have to be first and foremost, and they have to be large. Corporate tax, 35% is insane. 10% would be a lot. So once you can get to that, once you can get there, and reduce some of these EPA laws that Trump is doing, I think you're going to see the economy recovery.
We now switch to the North American Free Trade Agreement, and we wonder, do you think NAFTA was good, or do you think it's bad? And of course, as you know, President Trump has said he will repeal NAFTA so that we don't have this trade imbalance that we have with China and Japan.
Well, the North American Free Trade Agreement that you're talking about came about under the Clinton administration. Now, the idea of free trade was to make commodities and egress of commodities a little easier. The problem with that is that we have a huge trade imbalance. In other words, we have more coming in than we export out. I know that one of our biggest trading partners, of course, Mexico, and then Canada, and then we have to look, of course, at China, Japan, and then Taiwan and Korea. So that was fine, and it worked out great for those folks. But you see, by doing that, our manufacturing of goods in this country dropped down to what it is today, 14%. Our country has become a service industry, and sadly, we can't grow an economy on service industry jobs because they typically are just a little above minimum wage. So unless we have a federal minimum wage that is going to look like $15 to $23 an hour, that's not going to help. So on top of that, if we did pass those laws on a federal level that the minimum wage was going to be $15 to $23 an hour, we are going to do nothing but stagnate businesses, close businesses, massive layoffs, because there's just not the money to do that. So yes, NAFTA has to go, and we have to start thinking about America, and that's where we're at.
Mr. President, today we talk about liberalism here in the United States, and I know that you talked about it at the time that you were president. But the liberal left seems to have maybe taken a harder edge toward things in the United States and, well, their politics. What is your theory on liberalism today, and how does it associate with possible socialism?
Well, Walter, as you know, I was a Democrat for years. Nancy and I both were. And there just came a time when I realized that being a Democrat is just not getting the job done. So I switched. I became a Republican. Now, not when I say Republican, everybody says, well, you were conservative. Well, I had conservative ideas, but not really conservative. But that's not your question. So the question is liberalism. Well, you see, the liberals have been sold a bill of goods, and let me express that. Socialists have been working in this country since the 50s. And, of course, you remember Brezhnev. And it was Brezhnev who said that the United States would never be able to be taken over by any sovereign country or any country without something happening. Well, he also said that there wouldn't be a shot fired because America would fall from within. And the socialists have been working toward that goal, and they've been doing a very good job since the 50s, and they've indoctrinated themselves into the liberal ideology. Now, with that said, the liberals go out and they try to make anybody and everybody into a victim. And what I mean by that is that the African American folks in our country, there's no question that they've been on the short end of the stick, and I'll be the first to say that. But with that said, they have come to a realization after all these years, starting with LBJ, that they're not victims, that they are aspiring, that they are building a future for themselves and for their families, and that's where they have to be. But for the longest time, the liberals in the United States tried to make the African American folks in our country feel like they were victims, so that they would throw in with the liberal ilk, and then the folks of the they were gay originally, but now they're the LGBT and Q. The same thing for these folks. These are good people. They're Americans, and they must be accepted as Americans. Look, we don't all match the same drummer. We don't all march to the same drummer, no. But these folks are Americans. They have the same rights, and they should be granted the same rights. And I can tell you that the liberal left has tried to make them and turn them into victims as well, because by doing that and making them victims, then the liberal left is going to get them to vote for the liberals, for the Democrats. But more and more, I see the LGBTQ realizing that they're not victims, they're Americans, and that they do deserve respect, and they deserve to be treated like any other human in this country. And that's a fact. And I think the conservatives and the Republicans have come to that realization. And I don't really believe that it was the Republicans that were ever really against them. But we have to make sure that we're reaching across the aisle. We have to make sure that we're letting these folks know that we're with you. Now, we've got immigrants. And, the number's 11 million. 11 million illegal immigrants. Well, I know that the president currently wants to get these folks out. But let me say this, and if President Trump, if he gets to hear this, maybe he'll listen. We have to look at these 11 million, I think, because out of that 11 million, the folks that have come here, who have made a life, who have worked and are trying, now they may not be legal. But if they have been staying out of trouble, and they've been trying to do right and raise a family and work, and in many cases pay taxes, I don't think you should reward that by sending them or deporting them. I think we need to identify those folks. And we have to say to these folks, look, we're going to give you an opportunity to become legal. And as long as you're on that track to become legal, I think that you should be allowed to stay here with your families and work toward that goal. Now, the folks that aren't, the illegal immigrants that are either here to hurt America, to do crimes, to do drugs, to hurt people, to kill people, to join gangs, well, no, they can't stay, and they have to go.
Well, we look at different types of travel bans here, and I know that President Trump has put forth 2 different travel bans since he's been inaugurated this past January. The travel ban is to stop illegals and terrorists from getting into the United States that might do harm. It seems as though that the judges in the country don't seem to be going for his travel ban. What do you think?
Well, Walter, we're talking about that. We're talking about illegal immigrants, and like I just said, if there's folks here that will hurt us, that will break our laws, that will hurt people or kill innocent Americans, they cannot stay, and they must be rooted out. But the president, I think, is honestly trying to protect Americans. But again, for those folks that are here, and I know they're illegal, but if they're trying, and if they're holding themselves to the high standards of the American dream, and they're not in trouble, and they don't have a police record, I think we have to cut them some slack. I think we have to tell them that you've got to get on the ball and you've got to become a legal citizen of the United States.
Now, President Reagan, in your time, we never had issues such as Sharia law trying to get a foothold in the United States. The United States, of course, has its own laws and code of ethics and so on with regard to that. What do you feel about people trying to bring Sharia law into the United States?
Well, as you know, the United States started as a colony, and we came to this land to get away from the English and the rules and the laws that were just, they were horrid. So the answer to Sharia law is not even to discuss it, not even for a second. This is the United States of America, and we have our laws, and that's the way it's going to stay. The folks in America, let me say this. I have great respect for the American gun owner. Now, I'm talking about the legal gun owners of our country, and there's about 30 million of them. And this is exactly why our forefathers said that they have the right to keep and bear arms. And so, if there's ever an uprising, if there's ever a huge push by these people who want to initiate some sort of law change, such as going to Sharia law, I'm sure that those 30 million, if the government can't, will stand up and they'll explain to those folks in no uncertain terms, this is America, and it's time for you to leave.
And Mr. President, as we have our interview this evening, North Korea has supposedly been testing intercontinental ballistic missiles, as we understand it. And the powers that be in the United States today under the Trump administration believe that North Korea might try to get a nuclear head to put on one of these missiles and could possibly send it here to the United States. If you were still president, what would you do?
Well, there's no question that North Korea has been an issue for a very long time. And I think it's time that we stop the suffering in that country by moving forward militarily. Now, China's been asked several times by several presidents to do something about the leaders of North Korea, and they've done nothing. So again, it's time to have NATO get involved and go over to North Korea and calm things down once and for all.
Well, Mr. President, thank you for being with us, and thank you for allowing this time to let the folks know here in the United States that, well, these are thoughts you have, and these are thoughts that you care about, and things that, well, you hope will work out. Again, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, Mr. President. Thank you so much.
Walter, thank you. Yeah, I guess maybe we could say that we'd like to do this again sometime. I know I would. Of course, it depends on Mike, because he's the man. But I think we covered a lot of ground, and I hope that the folks that listen to this, I hope they understand that we have to work together, and that all people of the United States are exactly that. We are one people. And as long as you are a true American and you salute the flag and you say the Pledge of Allegiance, then you should have every right that any other American person has. It's been a long interview, and of course I'm kind of tired, but thank you, Walter, and I want to thank Mike Spears for allowing us to be on his show. He's a good guy, and we miss him at WNBC back in the day. Yes, we do.
And that's the way it is.
Direct from our newsroom in New York, in color, this has been the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.